Everyone, this is Nikachu, Merfolk Master, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can upgrade your poor folk, your budget modern Merfolk deck, into expensive folk, into a normal modern Merfolk deck. So if you love what I'm doing for modern, what I'm doing for Merfolk, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. So, well, anyway, this is the list that I have proposed. It is a very cheap, very affordable way of getting into Modern. However, how do we upgrade this deck from here? All right, so we've bought the base. How do I improve it? What is my next purchase that I should make for this deck? What is going to be the best bang for my buck, the highest impact to the archetype? So ideally, you want to start moving into something like this. This is pretty close to the lists that I have been playing recently. And I believe that, well, the cards that we see here are Cavern of Souls. We see Mutavault. We see Oboro, Palace in the Clouds. We see Minamo, Squeal at Water's Edge. We see Ether Vial. We see Phantasmal Image. We see Venser, Shaper Savant. And we see Relic of Progenitus. So we're going to go over all these cards. And I think the very first purchase that you should make, if you can, is Ether Vial. Now, it's one of the more expensive cards that you have to pick up. And right now it's sitting at about $32.50 on TCG Player. But this card is so strategically important to the deck. It's a source of mana acceleration, so you can help catch up on the draw. Also, when it's in a creature versus creature matchup, you can help tempo your opponent out by having an Ether Vial in play. Like, it's a huge deal in the humans matchup, in the spirits matchup, in the mirror match to have an Ether Vial. You get around Eidolon of the Great Revel with this thing. You get underneath counter spells with Ether Vial, so it's really good in the control matchups. It is also very good at freeing up your mana so that you can play your counter spells while deploying creatures against combo decks. So Ether Vial is just so strategically important to the deck, and I know it's very expensive. And what I would say is, if you can buy one, it's better than none. If you can buy two, it's better than none. So get any number of Ether Vials. I think those are the primary things that you should try to purchase. And if you have any spare money in cards that aren't very important to you, like for example, if you have an EDH deck with Snapcaster Mage or Jace the Mind Sculptor or Liliana the Veil, like, what are they doing in there? You don't need them in your commander deck. Like, liquidate them into Ether Vials if you're very serious about getting into Modern, a format that is very competitive. Not to mention, you will be at ease that your money is in a relatively expensive card in Modern, and it can be played in several other decks. If you intend to ever go to humans or spirits, Ether Vial will be there. And another reason I think you should prioritize Ether Vial is because humans and spirits are very big decks right now in Modern. They're still gaining in strength and in numbers, and it's pushing the value of Ether Vial up. It's been reprinted already quite a few times, so I don't expect this thing to get reprinted again, maybe for a very long time. I mean, they could, but I doubt it. It's not like they're reprinting Snapcaster Mage in every set, so I don't expect them to do the same thing with Ether Vial. Ether Vial is probably not going to see a reprint for quite a while, and so I think the price of Ether Vial can only go up. So I would make this my priority, and whatever money I could save could be invested in more cards, I would invest in at least just one Ether Vial. So like, yeah, and then if I had enough money, then I get the second Ether Vial, one at a time. So maybe I also want to say, what are you going to kick out for these Ether Vials? So at first, I think you should get rid of Mist Callers. So if you get one Ether Vial, get rid of a Mist Caller. If you get a second Ether Vial, get rid of the second Mist Caller in the main deck. And then if you get a third Ether Vial, start eating up the islands. So you take out one island, and then if you get a fourth Ether Vial, get rid of the last island. And I think that would be a sufficient route to upgrading from poor folk to normal merfolk. So yeah, I think you should try to get Ether Vial. I think it's the most important card to the archetype. I mean, yeah, you can play without it, but you're gonna suffer. Ether Vial is just so important, and you know, I know there's some people who say, oh, you have to have 4 or no Ether Vial. No, don't worry. Any number of Ether Vials are better than no Ether Vials. So moving on, I think the next most important strategic card is Mutavault, and Mutavault is not too expensive at $10.60. It's been a Grand Prix promo. It was reprinted. Well, I guess I can't say it was reprinted recently, but it has had a few. It has had more than one printing. Mutavault. It's just the manlands are just really strong in Merfolk. You do want to have a number of manlands to help you against attrition-based decks, against control decks. I mean, Tectonic Edges are great too in combination with Mutavault. Just more utility lands, the better. But Mutavault is just super important. Yeah, it's just a fairly core part of the deck. It just adds to your aggro strategy, while having protection from sweepers, having protection from Wrath of God, Supreme Verdict, Anger of the Gods, Collective Brutality, Planeswalkers, and so on. Mutavault is that important to the deck. So I think after you've gotten all your Ether Vials, you should move on to Mutavault, and you should, in pretty logically, just start replacing Tectonic Edges for the Mutavaults in the main deck. And then start pushing some of these Tectonic Edges into the sideboard, and you can start replacing some things like Tidebinder Mage for them. Or if Tectonic Edge is not very important in your metagame, you could just replace them with Mutavaults, and that would not be that big of a deal. So the next important cards I think you should try to get, and this comes down to your metagame, is either Phantasmal Image or Relic of Progenitus. Relic of Progenitus is a really, really good card if your metagame is ripe for it. So let me ask you this. Does your metagame have KCI? Does your metagame have Dredge? Does your metagame have Grixis Death Shadow? Does your metagame have Storm? Does it have Living End? Then you're going to want to get Relic of Progenitus first. Relic it's not super cheap, but I mean it's affordable at $4.37 at the making of this video. But it's still very, very important in all those archetypes that I just mentioned. To clean the graveyard of KCI so they can't continue their stupid loops. To empty the graveyard of Dredge to get rid of Conflagrate and creatures and all sorts of Dredge cards. Grixis Death Shadow to cut off Snapcaster Mage and prevent Gurmag Angler or Tasigur getting on the battlefield. To completely cripple Storm. They hate Relic of Progenitus. And Living End completely depends on the graveyard, so that's where Relic shines. But if your metagame is not deep on those graveyard-centric strategies, I actually think Phantasmal Image is therefore the card that deserves more priority over these other cards. Because Phantasmal Image is just very powerful right now, combining with Master of Waves, combining with the Lords to push through damage. But really, I guess it's really just Master of Waves. Being able to play Master of Waves, Phantasmal Image, copy this thing, can help beat so many decks, especially when you're behind. It's a real lifesaver. It's won me like tons of games. Not to mention, Phantasmal Image can then end up being extra copies of everything else that you have. And even the Lords. The fact that it can be cast for 2 mana is very, very important. And occasionally you go crazy with Mirror Reader. You copy the Mirror Reader and then empty your hand. So, yeah, Phantasmal Image I think is a very powerful card right now in Modern. A lot of decks are playing it. Humans and Spirits have no problem playing with Phantasmal Image because it is just... Well, I mean, it's more effective for them, but still, I think it is effective enough for Merfolk. I think it's what we need to push really far ahead. It's definitely way more vulnerable in our deck than it is in, say, Spirits or Humans. But I'm very much enjoying this card in Modern right now. So yeah, Phantasmal Image, if you didn't know, costs it's like $14.50. So it's a bit pricey. It's a bit pricey, but I think it's worth it. I think it's very strong. So I would prioritize getting the images over the relics, because the thing is, okay, so if your metagame is not super heavy on the graveyard, then you don't really need Mist Callers. Mist Caller is not very important. You can just remove the Mist Callers and then replace them with Phantasmal Image. Whereas if your metagame is heavy on the graveyard, you're going to want to maybe replace some Mist Callers and some Tidebinder Mages for those relics. And by the way, you don't need to transform it exactly into this deck, but you know, this deck features cards that have some priority or some stock importance to the compared to the Poor Folk deck. So next in importance, I think, is something like Venser or Echoing Truth. Like, you could, for budget reasons, you could be playing with Echoing Truth. And I just have Venser here because I don't have any other counter magic. But if you want to play with Spell Pierce and Deprive at the same time, then this thing could be Echoing Truth. It's not, Venser is really not that big of a deal. You don't absolutely need this card. So moving on, the next most important card is Cavern of Souls. This is not that important to the archetype. It's not. You can live perfectly fine without this card in your deck. I like to have one. I think one is nice to have just randomly against control decks. But it's not important. It's $73. You don't need this card. It's something, it's a low priority, like, get. You can live perfectly fine without Cavern of Souls. I've made many decks without any copies of Cavern of Souls, just so that I could max out on making Deprive more reliable, or to be as little vulnerable to Blood Moon as possible. But there are a lot of control decks out right now, and having uncounterable creatures in game one, it's something. It's something. So personally, I like to just have one. It's convenient. It's nice. And in some cases, you can put it on Wizard. And then if you have Venser, you can, like, do some nice things against Ad Nauseam. Like, they try to go Lightning Storm, exiling all their Simian Spirit Gods, and then you Venser uncounterably, so their Pact of Negation doesn't do anything. Venser the Lightning Storm after they've discarded all their lands, and then they'll have a struggle to win the game after that. So yeah, Cavern of Souls not important. Don't worry about this card. You don't need it. It's not that important. You could, like, just try to get it somewhere way down the line. Not important. And then lastly, let's talk about Minamo and Oboro. I don't know what the price of Minamo is, but Oboro is $21.71. First off, Minamo is not important at all. Nothing. It is almost as good as a Wander Wine Hub. It's a Wander Wine Hub that you don't have to show a creature. So Minamo is not important. In fact, we could just take this out and put a land here. See? It's strategically unimportant at all. I mean, you play around Choke, you play around Boil, you play around some Island Walk from Merfolk players. And more information about all this, you can go check out my primer video on the utility lands here. But it is, for 20, like, I don't know, for the amount of money that you have to invest in Minamo, it's not worth it. Especially if you're coming from a budget point of view. Now, Oboro does something, and as you'll see in my utility land primer, you can bounce it to your hand to discard spells. You can help filter brown mana to get double blue out of Oboro, because you tap this for a blue, and then you can pay the colorless on Mutavault to return this to your hand, and then you replay Oboro for the turn, and then tap it for a second blue, so you can cast your double blue spells. But for the $21.71 price tag, it's not important. You can get this last. Just get this last. This is not that. It's very, very low on priority. And of course, as you get things like Oboro, Minamo, Cavern of Souls, you just take out islands. That's all you do. You just take out the islands. And I would say that overall, you don't need Tidebinder Mage. Like, it's just a very nice, cheap creature. I mean, maybe in your metagame you need Tidebinder Mage, so you construct the deck as you want. I mean, none of these guidelines are firm, but I'm just saying, as you pick up other pieces and have to start moving things to the sideboard or make room in the sideboard for the new cards, I would start trimming on Tidebinder Mage and the Mist Callers. But depending on your metagame, maybe you want to keep these. Maybe you want to take out the Curse Catchers and replace the Curse Catchers with Mist Callers. I don't know. That is totally up to you. That's totally up to you. So, but I hope I have given you a bit of a guide where to go. So just to recap, get Aether Vial first. It's the most important. Liquidate any cards that are not very important to your competitive play to get these things, because the price might go up. Next, I want you to get the Mutavaults, because it's just a very good core part of the archetype. Then next, depending on your metagame, you're either going to get the Relic of Progenitus if you have a lot of Graveyard Hate decks, but if you don't have a lot of Graveyard Hate decks, then you're going to want to get the Phantasmal Image because it will just increase the power level of your deck. Then the last things that you want to get are these utility lands. They're very expensive and they're not important. They are not going to catastrophically increase your win rate by 1 billion. I think if you can get Aether Vial in your deck, it's going to increase your win rate by a lot. If you get Mutavault in your deck, it's going to increase your win rate by a lot, I think. And then somewhere, Phantasmal Image and Relic of Progenitus is somewhere in the middle. You could argue you should get Relic first because it's cheaper, so that's up to you. But I'm sort of giving you the a general path how I would upgrade this deck to something more competitive. So I hope you liked that video. If you have any other questions or comments or maybe requests for videos like this, let me know in the comment section below. This has been Nikachu talking about how to upgrade your Poor Folk deck to a competitive modern Merfolk deck.